Hello, Geeks and Ghouls. Death Trance by Graham Masterton is a novel about the gritty underbelly of the cotton industry. Yeah, it's also involving some Indonesian gurus that travel to the land of the dead and evil demons that lurk there and they're hunting for the souls of the innocent. But who cares about this boring crap? You're here for the cotton, alright? And before we go into the review for this horror novel, if you like horror or fantasy or other dark stuff, books, movies, whatever, comics, feel free to subscribe to this channel because there's more stuff coming. And if you're a fan of Graham Masterton, I'm a fan of Graham Masterton, and yeah, you'll see more reviews about his books. So let's go to the plot of the book, and let me start with a content warning. Of course, if you're familiar with Graham Masterton and his type of books, you probably understand what is going to follow, and Death Trance is one of his brutal books. This is definitely a splatter novel by a master of the genre. So yeah, what's happening in this book is not going to be about butterflies and rainbows, alright? There's some nasty stuff happening in this book. So our protagonist in this book is called Randolph Clare. He's the owner of cotton factories in Memphis, and since he's a dynamic capitalist and he's not into, unions and stuff, there is a trust of the other cotton factory owners in the city, but he's not part of them. He's actually a rogue businessman, so he's constantly undercutting them. He bids lower and they're furious at him. It's one spring night, and Randolph and his family are vacationing in Canada, but one of his factories catches fire, so he returns very fast to Memphis. And as he reaches the airport, he finds out that his limo is not there, so he takes a cab, and his cab driver warns him that there is word in the street that the other factory owners, the trust, are furious with him and they want to intimidate him. And he's like, no, there's no case this happens. And he even learns that his limo had a brake problem and couldn't go to the airport to take him because the brakes didn't work and something was cut. I mean, it's a coincidence, right? His factory catches fire, the brakes of his car are ruined. What else can happen? Well, in that very next chapter, we see what happens. We go to Canada to the small house his family is vacationing in. He has a house by a lake, in the middle of nowhere. And here we meet his wife and his 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And as they're in Canada vacationing, 4 veteran goons of the factory owners break into the house. They capture them, they brutally slay the 2 boys, and then they take the wife and the teenage daughter and they rape them, and then they kill them. And let me tell you what, it's a Graham Masterton book, so you understand that everything I'm talking to you about is presented in very graphic detail. It's very gruesome. I felt my stomach clench, I felt reading this chapter was very uncomfortable. It made me wince and feel, it made me feel that, yeah, that's bad, that's awful what's happening. But let me tell you something, and I was impressed by this. When it comes to the sexual violence parts of it, it also feels gruesome, and at no point I felt that these scenes were gratuitous, which, it's a pleasant surprise for a splatter book, because many times, and I'm not going to point to there's a layman books behind me, even though they're a prime example of this. Sometimes when we get to sexual violence, it feels pornographic. Here it just feels awful, and yeah, that was something that really surprised me about this book. So we switch back to Randolph, where he learns that his family was brutally murdered, and he collapses. So he's taken to hospital, and there one of his attending doctors, who is Southeast Asian, mentions that in his home country in Indonesia there is a legend that there are people who can go into a death trance and talk to the dead. So he learns about that and he becomes obsessed with this idea that yes, I can go and speak with my family again because I love them, they were taken from me so abruptly and so soon. But before he goes to Indonesia, he's trying to convince the doctor to take him there and have him meet a guru that is able to go into death trance, a sort of priest. He tries to find who kills his family because the taxi driver told him that yes, I've heard the chatter, they won't take you out, but his investigation is constantly meeting dead ends. And when I say dead ends, I'm kind of literal because the goons who murder his family are also murdering every person who is willing to speak to him about this case. So yes, there are a lot of graphic tortures and killings in this book, so yay. If you're a gore hound, you know that you will be very satisfied with that. Graham Masterton can really give you the violence, and I mean the very first chapter starts with one young half American, half Indonesian guy who is training to be a priest, do his first death trance, and the priest who is teaching him gets slain by the demons, what's the name? Layak, who are the servants of the demon goddess Rangda, are killing the priest in a very brutal way. So yes, there is also a supernatural type of slaughter in this book too. So yes, there is a lot of slaughter in this book. You'll be very pleased on this aspect. So yes, and he is also stalked by the fact that there is a whole conspiracy in the city of Memphis that covers those actions of the other cotton owners. So Randolph, hitting a dead end, decides to go to Bali, where he finds this guru who is able to go into death trance, and he's like, I'm not doing this anymore. But when he hears the check that Randolph is willing to give him, he's like, alright, one final time, I'll go there. So he's training Randolph, and they go in death trances, and some awful shit are happening there. The Layak are after them, and also the goons have followed them to Indonesia. So there's also this aspect of the novel, because as I said, this is a book about the cotton industry, and there are some people walking to the land of the dead too. I think I'll stop with the plot here because you clearly can understand where this is going. The ending was kind of fun in a way. It's well set up and it's climactic. Graham Masterton doesn't always have great endings in his book, but the ending of this book is definitely solid. So yeah, it's fun. This book is fun. And let me tell you why. Before I go into the review of the book, now I'm done with the first 50% of the plot, let me tell you something about the writing. I cannot talk about this because I read this translated version of the book. I think this is the Death Mask of Ragda, so yeah, I cannot speak about the quality of the writing, but what I gleaned out of the translation was that it's a breezy read. It has some good details, some good color of the civilizations of the places that it takes place in. I'm not sure, maybe he's going for some hip talk of the 80s where this book is set in, so it may feel anachronistic. He tends to do that. He tends to have a colorful, hip style of writing that sometimes feels out of time. So I cannot say that, yeah, that's the problem, because this book was published in 2000 and the translators make it point to obfuscate this aspect of his writing. So yeah, it might be a possibility. I'm not sure, I cannot speak about the writing. I feel that this book, Death Trance by Graham Masterton, manages to do something very interesting. I mean, it's not a serious book, alright? It's clear that this is a pulp novel. The plot is kind of very soap opera with plenty of gore thrown into the mix just to keep things interesting for nasty book audience. It was published in 1986, so yes, it was definitely in an era where a lot of blood and gore was a requirement for sales. And there are some plot holes, some leaps in logic that you can forgive because you're not here to read a serious book, alright? There is something that really stood out to me, alright? The bodies of Ronald's family are probably still lukewarm, and so a woman comes into the plot, into the book, and she talks to Randolph, and he says like, you know what, I'm down to fuck. Not that way, but this is how it comes out, alright? And Randolph is like, yeah, I'd hit that, but only when the corpses hit room temperature. And so, yes, the author has to add a love interest in the book, alright? Because that's the tropes. He wants to have some sexual tension, some kind of suggestive scenes, but he can have a guy who was just windowed so brutally, who loved his family, go down for it. So he toes the line of tastefulness. And he managed to do that. It's quite a feat. Alright, this is a cheap pulp horror novel where there are some sadistic veterans who casually murder people for cotton factory owners. And the authorities of the town of Memphis are willing to turn a blind eye to this. And there is also a mask of an Indonesian goddess that is killing unsuspecting people, and people going into the land of the dead, and demons living there, and all this kind of stuff. But this book never feels vulgar or gross, despite the bloodshed. It's entertaining. You have to turn off your analytical brain at some points, but not too much. There is never something jumping at you and you're like, your disbelief is suspended. No, it's not like that. You can read this book, and if you don't think hard about it, it's very well done. I mean, it's an ideal summer read for horror fan. I mean, okay, yes, it's the characters are nothing to write home about, but they're kind of memorable in their own way. They have their own reasons for doing what they do, even though they're exaggerated. But you know what? It doesn't matter really. You're here for the murders and the gore and the cotton industry underworld. And another thing that surprised me about this book is that the world building is solid. It understands its own rules, which is kind of interesting for a horror novel because, it's not something too deep. It's not overcomplicated, it's pretty basic, but it's clearly well thought out. And some things that happen towards the end are already set up earlier on. And yeah, there are some rules, which is quite a feat for pulp horror novels. Oftentimes there is no world building in this kind of books, and it's interesting to see this here. So yes, as you can understand, this book, Death Trance by Graham Masterton, is definitely a recommend by me. If I had kept my 5-skull rating system, I'll give it a solid 4. Gorehounds and horror fans who can stomach their novels medium rare would definitely enjoy this book as a breezy, fun read, and people also interested in the dark underbelly of the cotton industry. Alright, yes. It's stupid, but it's fun, and that's what matters. So I hope you liked this review of Graham Masterton's Death Trance. If you have read this book, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinions about this, or for any other Graham Masterton book you may have read, because I'm a fan and I'd love to hear you also like his books or not. Not for everyone, of course. And as always, like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Stay spooky.